Hello students, and welcome to your botany class again. So in the last class we have finished unit 1, and today I would like to take you to a new unit, that is unit 5 of your, if you have your textbook you can open it up, or else I'll read it out for you. Unit 5, Ecology and Environment. Section A includes ecosystem, biodiversity and its conservation, environmental issues, and section B consists of organisms and environment. So as I have said in the last class, section A you study it under botany and section B under zoology. So today we'll study with ecosystem, and this unit, ecology and environment, is comparatively an easy topic, and so it consists of 14 marks under section A, and section B carries 4 marks. So today we'll see ecosystem, which is in chapter 14 of your textbook. So if you have a textbook, you can open it up, or we will discuss along as I teach you in the class. Okay, so let's see ecosystem for today. The word ecosystem is derived from 2 Greek words. Ecos means house and logos means course of study. So ecosystem is a study of interrelationship and interaction of living organisms together, living organisms with one another and with the environment. So these organisms, they interact with one another. They interact among themselves, so also they interact with the environment. And all the individuals which can interbreed among themselves, and which occupy a geographical area is known as species. And different species or different individuals belonging to different species constitute a biotic community. And this biotic community, they cannot live in isolation. The biotic community, which consists of the living organisms, be it the microbes, be it the plants or the animals, they cannot live in isolation. They are interdependent upon one another. The plants and the animals, they are dependent upon microbes, and the microbes, they are also dependent upon the plants and the animals. So also the animals, they are dependent upon the plants. The plants are also dependent upon the animals. So they are interdependent, and they also interact with one another. The species, a particular species, they may interact among themselves. That is called intraspecific interaction, or different species, they may interact with one another. That is known as interspecific interaction. So the interaction that results from this may be beneficial to some group of species, may be positive in a sense that the interaction may be beneficial to one organism while it may be harmful to the other, or it may be mutual where both the species interacting are benefited, or where the species interacting may be one is harmed and one is unharmed, or one is benefited and one is harmed, or both the two are benefited from this interaction. So this biotic community, the biotic community, or the organisms constituted in this biotic community, they interact with one another. And this biotic community, they cannot live in isolation. The plants, animals, and the microbes, they cannot live in isolation. They live together, they live in an environment. They live in an environment, and they are influenced by the environmental factors. So the environmental factors which affect this biotic community are the light, temperature, humidity, salinity, pH, or the topography of the soil. So this biotic community and the environment, they influence one another, they affect one another, and as such, they are interlocked. They are interlocked in an inseparable relationship. The biotic community and the environmental factors, they are in an interlocked in an inseparable relationship, and this relationship, this integrated system, which results from the interaction of the living components as well as the non-living factors, or the integrated system which results from the interaction of the biotic community with the environmental factors, is known as ecosystem or ecological system. the integrated system which results from the interaction between the living organisms, the living things or the living components, and the non-living factors is known as ecosystem. And the word ecosystem was first coined by A.G. Tensley in 1935, and this ecosystem, the ecosystem may be permanent, or may be natural. For example, the pond ecosystem, or forest ecosystem, or grassland ecosystem, or desert ecosystem. These ecosystems are natural and they are permanent, while some ecosystems are temporary or man-made. For example, the cropland ecosystem or the aquarium. And the size of the ecosystem, it varies. Ecosystem can be a single drop of water in a dish, or it may be big as the ocean or the sea or the forest. So ecosystem, the size of ecosystem varies from one to another. Okay, so as we have learned that the ecosystem is an integrated system resulting from the interaction between the living components and the non-living components. So from the definition of ecosystem, we can make it out that there are two major components of ecosystem. The living components, or the biotic components and the abiotic components. The biotic components, they are also called as the living things or the living components, and the abiotic components, they are called as the non-living things or the non-living factors. So these biotic components, you have more or less idea about this. So this, as the name implies, biotic, bio means life. It includes all living organisms. And these living organisms are the microbes which we are not able to see with our naked eyes, and they include bacteria, fungi, protozoa, amoeba, etc. And it includes the plants, it includes even the animals. So living organisms consists of plants, animals, and microbes. So these living organisms, the biotic community or the biotic components, they interact with one another, as we have said, and this interaction or their relationship is for their nutritional purposes. One species interact with one another, or one species has a specific relationship with another species, or their relationship may be between two species, and the relationship is because of their nutritional purposes only, for obtaining their energy requirements or for obtaining their material requirements. So the relationship that exists between the different groups of organisms in case of this biotic community is because of their nutritional requirements or because of their nutritional purposes. And on the basis of the nutritional purposes or nutritional requirements, the biotic community can again be grouped into producers, then consumers, and decomposers. So, depending upon the nutritional requirements, the abiotic components, the biotic components consist of producers, consumers, and decomposers. So these producers, they are also called as autotrophs. Consumers, they are also called as heterotrophs. And decomposers, they are also called as saprotrophs. So these producers, we all know that these include the plants, particularly the green plants, which can photosynthesize or which can produce their own food. Auto means self. So producers includes the group of plants, green plants, which can photosynthesize or which can prepare their own food in the presence of sunlight, taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, water from the soil, with the help of the pigment, chlorophyll, which is present in the green parts of the plant. So these producers, they are responsible for sustaining the ecosystem. They are responsible for sustaining the other groups of organisms. Producers are responsible for sustaining the different categories of the consumers. They are also responsible for the survival of the decomposers in a sense that they provide the detritus to the decomposers. So these producers or the autotrophs, they prepare their own food by the process of photosynthesis, and it is this during the process of photosynthesis that oxygen is also released into the atmosphere with which we are able to survive. So the next category is the consumers, or they are also called as heterotrophs. So these heterotrophs are the groups of organisms or the group of biotic communities which directly depends upon the producers for their survival. They are dependent upon the producers for their nutritional requirements. They are dependent upon the producers for their energy requirements. So these consumers can again be further classified into herbivores and carnivores. Also, there is another category also known as omnivores. So this group of consumers, they are directly dependent upon the producers, and these herbivores are the group of organisms which feeds directly upon the producers, which depends upon the producers directly for their nutritional requirements, for their energy requirements, and the carnivores are those group of organisms or biotic components which depends upon the herbivores, or which eats the herbivores for their nutritional requirements, and omnivores, they are at the top of the trophic level, which depends upon the carnivores for their nutritional requirements. So examples of herbivores are those of rabbit or deer. Then carnivores include those of foxes or wolves, or even okay. So the consumers are those group of organisms or the biotic components which depend upon the producers, and they are classified as herbivores, which depends upon the producers for their nutritional requirements. Then the carnivores, which depends upon the herbivores for their nutritional requirements, and omnivores, which depends upon the carnivores. So these herbivores, they are also called as primary consumer. Then carnivores, they are known as secondary consumer. Then omnivores, they are also known as tertiary consumer. So these are the groups of organisms which constitute the consumers. The next component of the biotic, the next group of organisms which constitute the biotic component is the decomposers. So this includes groups of organisms which they are also known as saprotrophs, and they are responsible for decomposing the dead bodies of plants and animals. They are responsible for decomposing the dead bodies, and they are also responsible for degrading the waste, etc. So they are known as detritus. So decomposers, they are responsible for decomposing, they are breaking down these dead bodies of plants, animals. They are also responsible for degrading the waste or decomposing the waste. So during the process of decomposition carried out by the decomposers, they break down complex organic compounds into simple substances. So during the process of breaking down, these simple substances are released into the environment, and they are made available to the plants for absorption, or some of those inorganic substances, they are lost into the environment. So these decomposers, they get their nutrients during the process of decomposition, and those the raw materials for decomposition are constituted by the dead bodies of plants, animals, the waste. It can be even a leaf, a dead leaf, or a leaf fallen from a tree, or it can be a twig, or it can be even the excreta or the fecal matters of the animals. So this constitutes the raw materials for their decomposers to get their nutritional requirements again. So all this, the producers, consumers, decomposers, they are interlinked with one another. One is dependent upon the other, and they all are required for the survival of the other. So these three components are the constituents of the biotic components, and next is the abiotic components. The abiotic components includes those of the climatic factors or the inorganic substances. Inorganic substances like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, etc. And organic substances include those of proteins, carbohydrates, then fats, lipids, etc. And it includes all those climatic factors and edaphic factors, includes light, temperature, humidity, then pH, salinity, topography, etc. So the abiotic factors includes the inorganic substances like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and these are involved with the nutrient cycling. They are involved in the cycling of the nutrients, and they are responsible for the constant flow of nutrients for the biotic community. And the inorganic substances includes those of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and lipids. So these inorganic groups of abiotic components, they form a link between the living and the non-living world. So these proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and lipids, they form a link between the living and non-living world. These are synthesized in the bodies of plants, animals, and when they die, they are being decomposed by the decomposers. So they form a link between the living world and the non-living world. Then next, the climatic factors include that of light, temperature, humidity, then pH, hydrogen ion concentration, then salinity, topography. So these are certain factors which influence the biotic components. For example, light influences the distribution, light influences the growth, the reproduction, and the survival of the plants. For example, certain plants they respond to light. Certain plants they are able to grow in strong sunlight, and certain plants they survive best in shades. For example, those plants which can survive or which needs an intense light are those of the succulents or the desert plants, or the xerophytes, and those plants which needs a shorter duration or less intense light are those of the evergreen plants. So the intensity of light, then the duration of light, some plants will flower or they will bear fruit only when they receive a certain period of light, that is known as photoperiodism. So they will flower only after receiving a certain period of light, and if they do not receive the required period of light, they will not flower. And if there is no flowering, there will be no fruit production, there will be no seed production. So light influences the flowering in plants, and that is known as phototropism. And the other is that light even influences the distribution. So as I've said, some plants, like the plants, even the animals, some animals, they lives in they perform their metabolic activities during the daytime, and some animals they perform their metabolic activities, or they comes out only during the nighttime. Those are known as nocturnals, and on the other hand, those animals they perform their functions during the daytime. They are known as diurnal animals. Examples of nocturnal animals are the bats. And while majority of the animals they perform their activities during the daytime where sunlight or light is available. The next other climatic factor which influences the biotic component is the temperature. So our survival, human beings, we survive only within a narrow range of temperature. Between at the extreme ends, too low temperature or too high temperature, we are not able to survive that. It threatens our survival. So temperature, like light, it also influences our survival, influence our distribution, influence even the flowering in plants. And the influence of temperature, which influence flowering in plants, is known as vernalization. So temperature and light are two major abiotic factors that influences the biotic components the most. Then humidity is the amount of water vapor present in the atmosphere. Then pH of soil, salinity, topography, or these are the certain edaphic factors which influences the distribution or the migration of even plants, animals. Then even some other factors like wind. Okay, this wind is one a very important abiotic factor which influences the distribution of, or for example, the pollination, the carrying of the pollen grains from the stigma, from the anther to the stigma. So when pollination is carried by wind, this pollination can ensure the survival of that particular plant. Or for another thing is that the dispersal of seeds. Many of the seeds, they are dispersed by the wind to far away places, so that the plants then they can colonize different ecosystem, or they can colonize different geographical areas. So these are some of the abiotic factors which influences the biotic components. So ecosystem, which consists of which results from the interaction between the living things or the living components and the non-living things, they influence one another. The biotic components influences the abiotic components. So also the abiotic components also they influences the survival of the biotic components. So with this, as I've said, they have an interrelationship. We influence our environment, so also our environment influences us. With this, we can conclude that, we can say that the ecosystem, which is an integrated system, is dynamic. It's a dynamic unit of nature. And the function of an ecosystem to be dynamic depends upon 4 parameters. And these 4 parameters are productivity, decomposition, then flow of energy and nutrient cycle, which we will see one by one. Okay, so the functions of ecosystem can be broadly placed under 4 headings. Number 1 is productivity. Number 2, decomposition. Number 3, energy flow. Number 4, nutrient cycling. So for an ecosystem to survive or to be self-sustaining, it depends upon these 4 parameters: productivity, decomposition, then energy flow, and nutrient cycling. So let's see these 4 parameters or the functions of ecosystem one by one. Productivity. So what is productivity? What is productivity? Productivity is the total energy, is the total amount of energy that is stored or produced or obtained by a particular trophic level. So productivity is the total amount of energy that is produced, that is stored or obtained by a particular trophic level. We'll come to the trophic level in the succeeding topics. So productivity is the total energy which is produced by the producers, by the green plants, or it can be referred even to the total amount of energy that is obtained by the consumers from the producers, or it can even be referred to as the total amount of energy that is stored in the producers or even in the consumer level. So productive is the total amount of energy that is produced or obtained or stored at a particular trophic level. Produced at the producer level, obtained by the consumer from the producers, or amount of energy that is stored at the producer level or the consumer level. So productivity also varies from one ecosystem to another, and it is also can be defined as a rate of biomass production. So productivity is a rate factor. It's a rate factor, and it is measured in terms of grams meters square per year. It's a rate factor. As such, it is measured in terms of gram meter square per year. So, since it can be compared with productivity of a particular ecosystem can be compared with the productivity of another ecosystem. So when we compare the productivity of different ecosystems, it is found that the tropical rainforest and the coral reefs have the maximum productivity. They have the maximum productivity. Tropical rainforest, which lies in the equatorial region, where there is sufficient rainfall, heavy rainfall, the temperature is warm and moist, and the coral reefs, these ecosystems are said to be having the maximum productivity in the biosphere, in this earth. While when we look into the productivity of the desert, you find that in desert, there is less vegetation. The vegetation is sparse, so the productivity in the desert is the minimum as compared with the other ecosystem. It is characterized with less vegetation, which are separated by land or desert land. So this productivity in desert is minimum as compared to productivity in tropical rainforest and coral reefs. Since it is a rate factor, it can be measured. So this in comparison to other ecosystem, tropical rainforests and coral reefs, they contribute to the maximum productivity of the biosphere, and the desert, the minimum productivity. Productivity has two major aspects. These are primary productivity and secondary productivity. There are two major aspects of productivity: primary productivity and secondary productivity. So primary productivity is the productivity at the producer level. It is the total amount of energy produced, total amount of energy produced at the producer level. So primary productivity refers to the total amount of energy produced at the producer level, or in other words, it is the rate of photosynthesis. In other words, it is the rate of photosynthesis. So as we have learned, and we know that this photosynthesis is the process by which green plants prepare their food for themselves as well as for all the other living organisms. So this primary productivity is the rate of photosynthesis, or total amount of energy that is produced at the producer level. And there are two types of primary productivity. One is gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. So this gross primary productivity, it more or less refers to this only, the rate of photosynthesis, or total amount of energy, that is total amount of energy that is produced. That is called the gross primary productivity, while the net primary productivity is that during the process of photosynthesis, we know that energy is produced, and this energy is stored in the form of food and is stored in the form of carbohydrates. Then as they carry out of photosynthesis, the plants also need energy to carry out the various metabolic activities. And this energy that is required by the plants, they get it from respiration. The energy that is required by the plants, they get it from respiration. This respiration is an oxidative process, and the energy that is required by the plants, they get it from respiration, and during the process of respiration, energy is released and energy is consumed. So a part of this energy which is being produced by the green plants is used up during the process of respiration. So from the total energy that is produced, the plants also require to carry out the various metabolic activities which requires energy, and that energy is produced or released during the process of respiration. So energy, some amount of energy is used up during respiration. So net primary productivity is gross primary productivity minus respiration. So the gross total amount minus respiration. So the balancing amount or the balance energy constitutes the net primary productivity, or it's like someone's income. The whole amount that you get is the gross, and as you, from the whole amount that you get, you deduct it for some insurance, then or you pay some tax, you maintain it your family, you give some charity, and the little amount that you left for your saving is the net. So net primary productivity is the gross primary productivity minus respiration. So these are the two aspects of primary productivity. And the next is secondary productivity. So primary productivity takes place at the producer level, while secondary productivity takes place at the consumer level. So the amount of energy that we know that since the consumers, they get the energy from the producers, so the energy that is left to the consumers is this net energy from the producers. So secondary productivity is the total amount of energy or total amount of biomass that is produced at the consumer level. So this primary productivity and secondary productivity are the two major aspects of productivity, and productivity is a rate factor and is measured in terms of gram meter square per year, and since it's a rate factor, it can be compared, and as I've said, this productivity is maximum in tropical areas while it is minimum in the desert, and productivity constitutes one of the most important function of the ecosystem. And next is the decomposition, and we all have a little knowledge or idea about this decomposition, and decomposition is the breaking down of organic compounds into simple compounds or into inorganic substances which are released into the environment, and thereby they are absorbed by the plants, and some of them are lost into the environment. So this decomposition, it consists of different steps, a mechanism. There are 4 steps or 4 process, which includes fragmentation, then leaching, catabolism, and humification, and mineralization. So the process of decomposition involves fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification, and mineralization, which we will be discussing detailedly one by one in the next class. So overall, this ecology derived from 2 Greek words, and it involves interaction between the living organisms with one another and with the environment. So also ecosystem, which is an integrated system resulting from the interaction between the living organisms with the non-living factors, and it consists of abiotic components, which consists of producers, consumers, and decomposers. Then the abiotic factors consist of the inorganic substances, then organic substances, and the climatic and edaphic factors. And the functions of ecosystem: productivity, decomposition, energy flow, nutrient cycling. We've discussed about productivity, and we'll discuss about decomposition in detail in the next class. So please come back again for the rest of the class.